on her bus to join on board by Master Atlan. Chapter 53, Enemy with No Face. Ruby grunted as her foot was kicked out from underneath, but she could even get a start on her running. She scrambled up to her feet and hefted her scythe on her shoulder before charging her foe. But even with her speed, she couldn't catch him before he disappeared in the yellow blur. Nice effort, he said behind her as he grabbed her shoulder and flipped her. Ruby slammed into the ground with a gasp and moaned before looking up at the figure over her. But unfortunately, Miss Rose, I'm faster. Teleportation doesn't count over speed. You'll still need to keep trying, Minato encouraged before sliding and spinning around, the judging blonde aiming to blindside him. Yang quickly turned to face him and launching herself towards the older man with a blast from her gauntlets. She yelled and started throwing punch after punch at their instructor as he avoided her swings completely. The fiery blonde grew more and more irritated with each failed attack as she felt like she was only hitting air when she got close to him. She attempted to throw him off with a jumped punch, but Minato simply slid under her reach, and he knocked into her legs while she was still into the air, throwing her off balance, resulting in her falling in a heap on the ground. Her eyes flashed red as she looked up at the professional huntsman. It wasn't just because he was fighting them off without a weapon. It ticked her off more because it reminded her so much of training with her own dad. Minato perked up when he heard the quick footsteps behind him. He turned around and raised his guard as he knocked the javelin aside before he could strike him. The girl swinging it gave a triumphant yell and started turning on her heels to better extend the range of her weapon. Minato kept jumping back, avoiding the reach of the javelin as Pyrrha kept stepping in to close the gap. Pyrrha's weapon finally came to a halt when Minato countered her swing with a kick under Milo's point, but the older man leaned back and dropped to the ground to avoid the javelin when Peter threw it with the rockets behind it. Minato sprang back up and landed a double kick on Pyrrha's shield that knocked her off of her feet and backyard. Glad to see none of you are losing your spirit, Minato said with a pleasant smile before flipping over the surprise attack at his back. He landed back on his feet before smiling at his new challenger. Naruto spun back around to face his father. Kodachi clenched one hand while the other was covered to the elbow in ice. The whiskered faunus raised his guard and Minato did the same, of a coy smile on his face as he prepared for whatever his son would try next. Naruto yelled and threw out his hand, letting his Kodachi reach out on its wire to swing towards the older man. Minato jumped over when it came for his feet, but Naruto smirked at the huntsman's response and slammed his ice-covered hand on the ground. The ice surrounding his aura spread out from his touch and caught to the ground Minato landed on. The older man lost his footing and Naruto dove at the chance. Got you! Nope. Minato jumped back up again and tangled his feet over Naruto's outstretched arm. The young faunus paled at his father's smile as Minato twisted his body and threw Naruto over the ground bodily. Minato picked him up and casually dusted off his clothes before grinning at Naruto's expression. It was a good move to try and grab me, but didn't I teach you? Grab him! Minato's eyes widened and looked back in time to see all three girls swarming in on him at the same time. They all made to grab him, but he disappeared in a flash of yellow light before they could reach. Ruby yelled when she felt a sudden tug pull her off her feet. The older blonde had reappeared behind her, grabbing her scythe and pulling her along before it slipped from her grasp. Ruby barreled into the ground and Minato threw the scythe aside. Yang gave a loud roar and ran for Minato again as Naruto and Peter had her back. The moment he diverted Yang's charge, he had to sweep Peter's leg and kick on Naruto's back. They were all attempting to grab him now so that he couldn't escape them with his teleportation, a tactic no doubt his son had proposed to them, with knowledge that whatever was holding onto him teleported as well. Peter looked to be lunging in to attack, but at the last moment he dropped her sword and shield to tackle into him. While Minato was distracted with her, Yang came jumping up and launched onto his back with a devilish smirk. The older blonde was captured and looked over to see Naruto charging him with his ice-covered limb at the ready. His mobility hindered and now susceptible to be frozen in place. He was so proud of how far his son and friends had come. However, before Naruto could reach them, Minato and his stragglers disappeared in a flash of light. Naruto paused and looked around for where they might appear before he felt a massive weight drop on him. Mito jumped off of them and laughed heartedly at their tenacity. He looked down at the pile composed of Pira and Yang, while Naruto at the bottom. All three students looked up towards him, and he saw Ruby picking up her scythe in order to re-engage. He clapped his hands. All right, that's enough for now. I think we have a good idea for what I asked for. With that, the present students started to clap at the display their instructor showed against the four elite students. Mito smiled as the four students helped each other up to their feet and made sure their weapons were back with their proper owners. Their teammates congratulated them with cheers on the sidelines of the empty field. It was the first session of his optimal seminar this semester, and so far these weren't that many teams that showed an interest. Less than 10, but the ones that did seemed very interested with the prospect of learning what to expect in the real world and learn from his lessons. Weiss even brought a notepad which he told her she wouldn't need, but she stubbornly kept a tight hold on. He still had a ways to go to earn the authority of a teacher. Now volunteers performed admirably, but what did this show you? He looked around at the gathered learners. Anyone? Sir, Ren raised his hand. I believe what you were trying to show us is that even when facing an unarmed opponent, do not expect the match to go in your favor. Even without a weapon, your opponent may have other skills at their disposal, superior compatibility, a semblance that evades the odds, or greater experience. Even if this experience was only to incapacitate you, you evaded and countered them much longer than anticipated for an unarmed opponent. Excellent job, Mr. Lai Ren. Minto nodded. He's exactly right. Now, when you graduate, you all will be very capable fighters by the time you're official huntsmen. But with that, certainly there may also come overconfidence. The purpose of this exercise was to make you wary of underestimating your foe. Even if they may not have the same training as you, they could still be as skilled or make up for their lack of it with experience, ability, or planning. Mr. Namikaze, Weiss questioned, are we expecting to spar with you for every class from now on? No, Miss Ni. This is only an introduction for the seminar, one that I'm happy to say that the volunteers quickly picked up on. Minto smiled as the four students perked up. My semblance is teleportation, which lets me instantaneously disappear and reappear over the battlefield. How do you deal with a foe like that? You attempt to grab them, as they did, and hinder their movement as best as possible. How do you deal with someone fast? Don't let them get their footing. How do you fight someone who dominates in close quarters? Beat them outside their range. You need to do everything you can to analyze your foe's abilities and prepare for whatever they can do. We'll also have exercises of facing down multiple opponents, going through obstacle courses as efficiently as possible, and even scenarios where you might not even have a weapon to use. Minto smiled. If you can be prepared and use what you can to your advantage, you will survive in the world of hunters. And I guess that's it for today. Now, if you excuse me, I haven't eaten, so Minto disappeared in another flash of yellow that left the students that had come to the optional course murmuring to themselves, mostly about wanting a semblance as cool as that. It has weaknesses. Naruto spoke up between his friends when they started complimenting his father's ability. I swear it has weaknesses that can be exploited, and if you can, then he's just like any other guy. Oh yeah, Yang crossed her arms. Then why didn't you try them? I did, the Faunus muttered. He's just kicked your ass. Kiba finished getting a glare from his partner before just patting his back sympathetically. It's okay. I'm sure you'll get the chance to kick your dad's butt someday. But for now, why don't we just get something to eat too? Mind if we tag along? The two closest members of Team SSSN came over. Sun and Neptune waved to their new friends, while the monkey Faunus grinned. Dude, you should have told me your dad was such a badass huntsman. Like he was holding all of you off like it was nothing and popping up all over like pew pew. And how does he even... Okay, enough. Yang was the one to speak up. A frustrated frown set firmly on her face as she glowered. Next person to bring up the fight and how cool he was. And I'm going to shove my fist in their mouth, gauntlet and all. Understood? Her friends paled. Sun's mouth slowly closing with an audible clap as he lowered his arm at her probably serious threat. The busty blonde nodded and stomped ahead. Not gonna lose to the next old guy that challenges me to fight. Okay, Sun drawled before beaming with excitement again as he turned to the rest of the Beacon students. So how have you guys been? Do anything exciting and action-packed recently? His eyes panned between them expectantly. Very, very recently, in fact. And what might you be insinuating? Blake inquired. Oh, come on, I heard the stories about the giant robot seen chasing some kids around downtown, and then cops finding pieces of the robot wrecked all over the ground beneath the highway, fighting a huge mech under a bunch of speeding cars. That's too cool. So, was that you guys? Why do you mean every crazy thing that happens in the city revolves around us? It's a big place. We're not the only ones that live here, you know. Sun sulked at the thought that he could be wrong as his tail lowered behind him. Neptune tried to console his partner, but Sun was quick to perk up again as he smirked knowingly. Oh, no way, you guys had nothing to do with it. He looked towards what he assumed was the weakest link in the group and wrapped an arm around John's shoulder. Come on, man, can you tell us anything? Sun was surprised when John flinched and almost jumped out of his reach like a cornered animal. The scraggly blonde looked around at all the surprised stares he was getting before he straightened himself out. Sorry, what were you guys saying? I was just asking if you could tell us if anything cool happened. Sun elaborated before looking the blonde over. Dude, you okay? You look tired. Yeah, I'm fine. Just a little spacey. The juniper leader muttered to himself and scratched his head before sighing. Actually, I think I'll see you guys later. The tall blonde was already making his way back to the dorms before they could say goodbye. Pure silently stepped off as well, waving them goodbye with a smile. A few of them noted as being more strained than her usual brimming beam. We're not all that hungry either. To their surprise, Kiba, Tintin, Ren, and Noah separated to follow the other two teens before the new soccer turned back. Sorry, but we ain't really feeling up for it right now. See you back in the room. The remaining members of the group watched their friends walk out with varying expressions on their faces. To be honest, this wasn't the first time they had noticed their teammates and friends acting distracted or distant. It happened ever since they had come back from their mission in the city. Apparently, while they were dealing with Toshwick and his giant robot, they faced off against a group of talented individuals who weren't Faunus, but were guarding the White Fang's rally. They were skilled and dangerous, able to hold off the two trios by themselves long enough for everyone to escape before they tried to run off. Initially, they believed that those two might have been more of Torchwick's special guards or something. But then they heard that one of them took his own life with barely any hesitation. That was unnerving to hear and shattered any hope of them simply being more of Torchwick's goons. And there was something at play behind the scenes now, and they had only gotten a glimpse of it. Hunting. I suppose I should inquire if this kind of recklessness is a commonality for you students. The decorated general questioned as he looked over his scroll and replayed the footage they had received from a street camera of students evading a prototype paladin. The large man shook his head tiredly. I don't remember many of your former students causing a commotion quite like this. New batch of students. I'll be honest, Glinda, Ospin, I'm worried you might be losing your edge in teaching your students. That's a very astute observation, James. Glinda's hand suddenly tightened around her riding crop as her brow twitched. The elegant woman fixed her spectacles and attempted to show an even unperturbed smile towards the military man. I'm sure you must be quite overjoyed knowing you have your missing technology back. Some assembly acquired, unfortunately. The general dryly chuckled. I suppose I was walking into that one. Yes, you were. Now have we all gotten in our shots? The deputy and general looked aside with some shame of their childish jabs as the headmaster nodded. Good. Then can we move now? James, I'm sure you called this meeting for a reason, correct? Yes, I did. Ironwood walked around the office while continuing to cycle through the information on his scroll. I'll be blunt. I'd like your help in letting some of my forces investigate the city for more evidence against the White Fang. Osmond didn't react, but Glinda was more than willing to offer her thoughts on the subject. Are you mad? That's insane! The deputy shook her head. You're asking us to help you convince the police, the council most likely, to let a foreign force work in the streets. That's... I know. Then you know that's a ludicrous request, but it's still one I have to make, Ironwood persisted, because I need to rectify this as soon as possible. James, I understand that this may hurt your pride. My pride? This is something far more crucial than my pride, Glinda. I showcased the Elysian Paladin to civilians a few days ago to assure them that the future was safe, that we were making strides forward in creating a stronger and safer guard to protect them from whatever may endanger them in the future. And the day I do that, the same day, he slammed his hands down on Osmond's desk, they go parading one of the units they stole and run it around in downtown Vale. James, Osmond's voice was even and calm as he spoke to his old friend. I know. Also, they painted their insignia over the body of it. They are taking a piece of our army's technology and using it to inspire fear in the hearts of the people. They're painting my army as monsters. And James shook his head. I can't let that continue. For now, just trust the Vale police to do their jobs and figure out what they can about this Roman Torchwick and his connection to the White Fang. The headmaster spoke humbly. I'll keep you informed, but you know I can't go so far as to allow your men to roam the streets. He saw the Atlas general barely conceal his words behind his lips. I'm sorry. James seemed to suddenly accept the news and nodded his head. He let out a long sigh and shook his head before picking up his scroll again. He flicked the screen and held it out towards his companions. We still need to discuss the other matter at hand. Ah, yes. Osmond looked down at the graphic image of the younger man laid out on the autopsy table. Our mystery cadaver. The autopsy report shows that his death was caused by several trauma to the head and brain, a cut in his brainstem, and several blood loss. Linda read off. The coroner noted in her report that when she checked the abrasions in his hands and the objects in his broken arm, she found special metal pieces surgically implanted between the radius and ulnar bones, hollow pipes used to channel sound sound better, and then amplified them through the special glass in his palms. Apparently, she also found intentional tampering with the dorsal horn in his spinal cord, meaning he couldn't feel pain. So we have an unknown human individual located in the place that a reported White Fang meeting was being held. Who was modified and surgically altered to not feel pain. Osborne shook his head with a mirthful smile, and he made to slip from his mug. My, what mad times do we find ourselves in? I believe we need to speak with some of your students about the meeting with this man. James, Osmond lowered his mug and rubbed his temple. I'm not going to allow you to interrogate my students. Osmond, they were spotted in the area around the time this body was dropped. That cannot simply be overlooked. But you read the report. Glinda intervened. The blood splatter within the pipe shows that he committed suicide. He may have been killed with his own weapon. But James, Osmond interrupted, I will not have you in my office doubting my students and suspecting them of something as sadistic as slaying a man with his own weapon. I'm sorry, but it's a precaution. We can't overlook something as important. I understand your worry about my students. The argument came to an abrupt halt when the elevator rang. The three individuals looked between each other, surprised in what they were in that they weren't expecting anyone before the doors opened. Salutations! A bubbly orange-haired girl quickly stepped in with two armed guards, reaching out and trying to stop her. She avoided the reach, and the freckled girl stopped off in front of Ironwood with a salute. Greetings, General Ironwood. Penny. James looked up at her bodyguards. You aren't supposed to be walking around like this so early in the evening. General, sorry. We apologize. The two soldiers saluted as well. We didn't mean to interrupt you. She told us she had business on the upper floors, and we assumed she was going to make a call back to Atlas. But then she brought us up here. Ironwood raised his hand, and they stopped. The towering man looked down at the smiling student and shook his head. Penny, I told you to stay in the dorms. I know, sir, but I made a discovery about this deceased individual you were looking into. Penny happily held up the file she was keeping in her hand up to the general. I thought you would like to see it yourself. Quite an excited student you have here, James. Osmond stood up his chair and walked around his desk to meet their little intruder. And who might this young lady be? This is Penny Palladina, an aspiring young student from Atlas. Penny, this is Headmaster Osmond. Professor Osmond, salutations. She waved at the older man with glee. It is a great honor to meet someone like you in person. I have a friend named Ruby who says that you are one of the nicest men she has ever met. Is that so? Indeed, General Ironwood speaks highly of you. Penny, James interrupted the girl with a forced cough and motioned down. You said you had something you wanted me to look at. Yes, about the deceased individual you discovered in downtown Vale. Penny's eyes narrowed suspiciously, and she started speaking in a hushed voice. I've recently discovered that he is dead. James sighed and Osmond gave a hearty chuckle while Glinda shook her head. The two soldiers suddenly felt like they should be prepared for latrine duty for the rest of their careers. The decorated general nodded. Thank you for the insightful deduction, Penny, but we are already aware of that fact. You are? The freckled girl innocently questioned before looking between all the adults. She deflated but nodded her head solemnly. Of course, sir, my mistake. I should have known you would already take notice of someone being declared dead twice. My apologies. What? James and Osmond shared a look before the general quickly snatched the file from her hand. He opened it and started reading. Abumi declared deceased along with his family and the entirety of his village a number of years ago. She looked at Penny. How did you find this? Well, after you said that you could not find any blood records, fingerprints, or any known criminal records of the individual in question, I started to do a little investigation work of my own. Penny said with a smile. I couldn't find anything at first before I started to delve into records of people that were already deceased. How could you know? How could you know to do that? Well, I referenced it with all living people I could, and it didn't work. So I just thought the deceased individuals may prove useful. Tinta stepped forward, but to do something like this would take countless hours. Not really. I merely processed the information. I mean, yes, I did it all by hand. She jumped a little and rubbed her throat. I'm very tired. Penny, continue. Of course, sir. I couldn't find any criminal record, but the blood of the cadaver matched the blood sample of a hospital record from many years ago when a child entered into an emergency care station set up after a small village was destroyed by a sudden grim attack. Unfortunately, the grim threat was too uncontrollable, and the station, as well as all remaining survivors, were attacked. It was documented that there were no survivors. The room went silent after the somber story before Penny perked up. But apparently, this man did. Until now. My apologies. That's fine. Onward nodded while never looking up from the file. You did excellent work, Penny. You're dismissed. Yes, sir. Penny saluted and skipped back to the elevator, the two guards following her salute and headed back as well. Osmond sighed and slowly ran at his desk before stopping by his chair. A dead man, or more likely a boy that went missing years ago, only to come back dead on a table. The white-haired headmaster looked up towards his companions inside. I think I know what you're thinking. The White Fang have already aligned themselves with this tortured rogue. It may be possible that they are collaborated with Elysium as well. Elysium, Linda repeated. I thought that was only a myth. We've never found concrete evidence of their operations, but there have been mentions of them before. When we apprehended a politician who had dealing with the Wilsk crime ring, he offered to reveal everything he knew about them for amnesty, but before we could question him, he was killed in our custody. And when we caught the man posing as an officer, he killed himself before we could interrogate them. No prior records, no fingerprints, no blood work, nothing. Individuals with no identity or previous affiliations, ghosts, shadows, dead men. Truly, it is just the stuff from a scary story. Osmond sighed and sat back in his chair. But unfortunately, we know better than anyone just how much merit some stories can carry in our world. Hunting, good boy. Nora Kunin buried her face in Akamara's coat, but despite her reveling in the embrace of the fluffy animal, the joyful bruiser was not really as happy as she usually was. She just sat and continued to pet the large dog, who returned her love in full, sitting in Juniper's room with the rest of her team and two additions to join them. Blake said she didn't know anyone by the description we gave her. Tenton finally spoke up to break the silence. Naruto didn't either, which means those guys definitely weren't part of the White Fang, which means they must be associates of Roman Torchwick. Pierre spoke. I'm surprised he can find individuals like that under his employ. I'm more concerned with just how many more people like that he may have in his ranks. Ren added, sending a look towards both Nora and Kiba as he remembered the brunt of the man's attacks they took. The cuts that made it past the aura and the blood that dripped from their ears by the awful sounds he created. He's right. We need to be prepared for more people like that. Cuba nodded. It's for the best. There was a wave of agreement from everyone before he returned to the stifling silence. John sighed and sat up from his bed as they looked towards him. The tall blonde shook his head. I guess I'll say it then. I know it's been a few days now, but I can't get the sight of that guy out of my head. Not one bit. Oh, we nodded. I suppose we aren't the only ones then. It's true how difficult it is not to think about it after that night. Nurse slumped into the dog fur. I can't eat. Well, not as much anymore. It was disgusting. We all saw blood in the face and everything, but it'll pass, Kiba said while looking at the ground. Just try not to think about it, and you'll forget about it soon enough, like a horror movie or something. That's not the problem. John stood up and shook his head. It's not just how terrible it was to see, but we made a guy kill himself. I mean, he hurt you guys, and I know he deserved to get his butt kicked, but still, John. And Pierre stared forward and held his shoulders softly to get his attention. She saw the distress, the tired look on his face. When he turned to her expression fell. Is that what's been bothering you so much for the last few days? I'm sorry. I know he was our enemy and stuff, and we should have beaten him. But knowing that faced with getting caught by us, he decided to. John shifted. that was the better alternative. I don't think it was us, or at least we didn't scare or intimidate him into killing himself or anything. Attendant stood up. Did you guys hear what he was mumbling to himself when we had him surrounded? He kept swearing like a lot, more than Kiba and Naruto usually do, which is pretty impressive. Nora piped up before it turned her head, but then he started talking about getting caught, and it's finally happening, and he seemed pretty scared too. He did, but the way he laughed and ridiculed us before doing it makes me think he was just trying to collect himself before he did it. Teddy looked around. He didn't do it because he was worried of what might happen to him if we caught him or brought him in, but he was worried about what would happen if those other people he was working with found out. He even said they'd probably be laughing at him for having to do it. The others grimaced at the morbid thought as the bunny-haired girl continued. I think he killed himself because of whatever alternative he was going to be faced with after being locked up was worse. That was a sombering thought. The 6 students immediately thought back to the scene moments by moment, the sound in the wind slashing through his face, the gurgle he let out before he repeated the process on himself, the terror he must have put himself through before it finally come to an end. The idea that there was a punishment worse than that waiting for him sent chills down his spine. Still, even with the possibility that they weren't the only factor in that man's suicide, there was still an underlying tension in the room. John, Ren stepped forward and looked to his leader critically. I'm sorry to have to ask this, but have you ever seen someone die? The tall blonde looked surprised by his question before Ren elaborated. Whether it was a close relative or even just a passerby, have you ever had an experience with death that close before? No, John shook his head. I never really had anyone that's passed away. Maybe some distant relatives, but no one I've known personally. Ren nodded and asked the same of Pyrrha. The champion shook her head. Ren then looked towards Kiba. Never people. Animals being put down due to age or injury, but never people. I see. Ren turned to the last member. Tenzin looked up at Ren's inquiry and remained silent even after he asked. However, her silence was just as much an answer as a vocal one. He nodded and looked down to see Nora had her face in Akamaru's neck. Then I suppose we have more experience in this area than most of you. I can tell you all that it doesn't get easier watching people die, but you can deal with it better. Ren looked around at his friends, had some open ear at what he said. Nora and Tenzin didn't look up from the ground, but he knew Nora understood what he was talking about, and he guessed Tenten was familiar with it as well. You have to know what this reaction is. That this reaction is normal. It's expected of you to feel worried and saddened by something like this. I'd say you should be more concerned of the day when you don't feel anything at all. But even though you feel like this, you have to accept it and be ready to move on. That man was our enemy, and although I want to see him die, that doesn't excuse what he was trying to do. He was adamant on killing us and taking sadistic joy in the idea of making us suffer. And if we let him shake and falter us against the effort to stop Roman Torchwick and the White Fang, then he'll have won even death. That was true. They still didn't know their enemy's intentions or full plan. But if they were being shaken up by the death of one foe, then there was no telling what they were going to do what they were going to let them get away with in the long run. It was awful, but they had to be prepared for the worst that could come from this fight. Our enemies are fierce, and they're willing to go further than many of us could ever dream. When warned, I doubt they'll take the death of their comrades so lightly. Hunting. So apparently one of the corpses offed himself when he got caught. Oh no, how tragic. However, when we get on, yeah, that was pretty much my reaction too. Emerald shared a chuckle with the silver-haired assassin before her smile fell, and she resorted back to her normal scowl while facing him. Don't falter for even a second in her disguise for him, even when they both reveled in the pathetic existence of their lowly helpers. Don't let him believe for a moment he was anything else but a nuisance. But the smug jerk continued to smirk before the green-haired woman sighed. I don't see why they even bother to keep us updated so often. Right, Mercury laid back on the floor and crossed his arms behind his head. I think they're under the impression that we need to be on top of their situation, or that we seem to care. He shook his head, not sure how else to convey to them just how little we do. They tell us because I requested they keep us informed of any development. I asked Orochimaru himself to pass that along to his followers. Mercury sat up and Emerald gulped in horror at the realization that the leader was the one behind it. But despite their earlier talk, Cinder merely let their discussion pass and stood up from her bed. The lovely ebony-haired woman strolled over to the window and looked out the red and orange sky dyed by the sun. It's good to keep a stock of what they can and can't use. Why don't we get updates like that from the White Fang? Because I don't have all day, Cinder said with her silky voice and disarming smile. Elysium have trained soldiers who put themselves in dangerous situations for our goals. The White Fang have barely competent civilians dressed up to die, and it's not as if they'll bother to keep us so frequently updated. She crossed her arms and let a coy smile stretch her lips. I certainly hope Adam can keep them under control before I have to start involving myself. Her two associates smirked at the delightful image of her keeping all those terrorists carried under her heel. Mercury scoffed. So hard to find good help these days, and it's unfortunate that these people are still the best they offer. Emerald grasped before grimacing and counting off her fingers. We have all our operations being handled by that walking phallus in mascara, an army of whiny animals with soldiers so chipped their arms are basically hanging from strings, and a group of highly trained fighters with the same survival instincts as lemons. Now that's actually an intriguing prospect. Cinder spoke up and got their attention as a sly smile pulled into her full lips. To be able to command your subordinates to take such action against themselves to preserve your secrets. Maybe I should ask Orochimaru how he motivated them. Eyes widened in horror as Mercury and Emerald both paled at that line of thought. The silver-haired boy stood back up and turned the conversation in a different direction. Hey, Torch Week and the goons say it said who it was that crashed their rally. The same people who attacked the dock too while they were snagging the dust. They're proving to be a recurring pain in our ass. Emerald nodded while stepping up to Cinder's side. Do you want us to take care of them? Because they aren't exactly hard to find. The last time I left in order to finish off a rogue element, you two absconded with the location and killed the target yourselves against my wishes and endangering your covers here in Vale. Emerald shrunk back in shame as Mercury scratched his head and looked aside. The errand they did to earn her favor really came back to bite them in the ass. The black-haired woman shook her head. It doesn't matter. Don't bother worrying about these troublemakers. Better to know who they are and keep an eye on them than risk the chance of them knowing us and altering others. So we should watch them, get to know them, and try and make friends with them. I'm sure with your wooden personality, that should be a simple task for the both of you. Mercury chuckled at the pained expression Emerald made at that suggestion. And I'll keep an eye out as well. I watched them earlier today at that seminar. Why don't you both join in? I'm sure that will come with a wealth of knowledge. Why did you go to that thing? I was curious, something of fascination to finally see our colleague's motivation for myself. And fascination. That's what I said. Don't question it. Cinder turned and stepped over to the desk before sitting back comfortably on the desktop. Our associates' behavior may not be the most ideal, but they are necessary to complete our task. Roaming will continue to move the dust. The White Fang will continue to gain more members and support, and Elysium will assist us through any trouble we have as best they can. She smiled and looked between her followers. These people can think they're foiling our plans and stopping us as best as they can, but as long as we manipulate the strings out of their sight, then it will only be a fruitless effort to stop us. And when the time comes, then we can simply deal with them as well, extra and evil worse than any imaginable. Hunting. Now on to more important matters. Cinder suddenly changed the conversation as she walked over to the door with a chuckle in her voice. I found another comrade that I believe could be essential to our victory. Seriously, that quickly? Mercury raised his brow. That's impressive. Emerald looked less convinced. Well, what does this person want? Money, power, influence? No, nothing so complicated. Cinder swayed over to the door and took hold of the lock before turning to the two and smiling. Some people don't need a worldly desire or titles or power to motivate them. For some, the most dangerous individuals, chaos is enough to fulfill them. She enjoyed the sweat on their brows and the audible gulp as she opened the door. Meet our newest comrade. She was also surprised to see the fear on their faces change to one of confusion and annoyance once they met their new whiskered comrade. Him! Emerald merely screeched as her scowl grew and she pointed at the man silently standing in the doorway. We have to work with him! Cinder. Mercury raised his hand. You understand this is one of the guys throwing a wrench at the cogs, right? Poor, simple children. Cinder shook her head derivatively. You're wrong, but I can see where your mistake is coming from. This is not the individual you know as Naruto Uzumaki, but a separate entity feared as Otoran. Beg pardon. Otoran came into existence last semester when Naruto Uzumaki had his hand chopped off attempting to grab a chicken tender from his friend. The severed hand grew a new body and created our friend here, a being of pure evil and mischief. The mute blonde grinned as Cinder smiled as well. He will be essential to our victory. Emerald and Mercury weren't sure how to respond. They showed a look, both noting their jaws were hanging open in audacious disbelief. Mercury shook his head. Sorry, Cinder. I have to think either the student tricked you or you're high. No way, this guy. He was interrupted when Otoran jumped forward and stabbed the assassin several times in the abdomen. Mercury fell over like a heap as the vicious blonde grinned and spun his knife. Cinder smiled. Any more doubts? Wow, he's pretty malicious. All the concentrated evil of one person becoming another being will do that. And this might be interesting after all. Can I get some help, please? Don't underestimate how someone like this can be crucial to our plans. Please now down here. What's he going to do? Nothing for now. Perhaps I'll let him handle my assassination jobs for now until we can make a greater use of him. Most of my blood is out of my body. Or why not stick him with Torchwick? I bet that'd be hilarious. Yes, I'm sure having Otoran around will make sure he stays in line, and perhaps he'll connect with Neo rather handsomely. I think I see a light. Nope, it's fire. I suppose Roman can keep a better eye on him for now. You can't have two people who look alike running around at the same time. Yeah, might cause some trouble, some problems if there's more of one of them. I think I see Papa Black calling me, and Granny Black too, who is much worse than the abusive father who cut off my legs. Shall we go introduce our new compatriot to our old ones? After you. Cinder strutted out with Emerald on her heels, and Otoran casually followed after. They closed the door behind them and locked up afterwards. My body is trying to die. End of chapter 53.